chapters 6 through 10 of the apocryphal book of First Maccabees, Douay, Rheims version. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information and to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Sam Stinson. Chapter 6. Now, King Antiochus was going through the higher countries, and he heard that the city of Elymais in Persia was greatly renowned and abounding in silver and gold, and that there was in it a temple exceeding rich, and coverings of gold, and breastplates and shields, which King Alexander, son of Philip the Macedonian, that reigned first in Greece, had left there. So he came and sought to take the city, and to pillage it. But he was not able, because the design was known to them that were in the city. And they rose up against him in battle, and he fled away from thence, and departed with great sadness, and returned towards Babylonia. And whilst he was in Persia, there came one that told him how the armies that were in the land of Judah were put to flight, and that Lysias went with a very great power, and was put to flight before the face of the Jews, and that they were grown strong by the armor and power and store of spoils which they had gotten out of the camps which they had destroyed, and that they had thrown down the abomination which he had set up upon the altar in Jerusalem, and that they had compassed about the sanctuary with high walls as before, and Bethsura also his city. And it came to pass, when the king heard these words, that he was struck with fear, and exceedingly moved, and he laid himself down upon his bed, and fell sick for grief, because it had not fallen out to him as he imagined. And he remained there many days, for great grief came more and more upon him, and he made account that he should die. And he called for all his friends, and said to them, Sleep is gone from my eyes, and I am fallen away, and my heart is cast down for anxiety. And I said in my heart, Into how much tribulation am I come, and into what floods of sorrow wherein now I am, I that was pleasant and beloved in my power. But now I remember the evils that I did in Jerusalem, from whence also I took away all the spoils of gold and of silver that were in it, and I sent to destroy the inhabitants of Judah without cause. I know therefore that for this cause these evils have found me, and behold, I perish with great grief in a strange land. Then he called Philip, one of his friends, and he made him regent over all his kingdom. And he gave him the crown, and his robe, and his ring, that he should go to Antiochus his son, and should bring him up for the kingdom. So Antiochus died there in the year 149. And Lysias understood that the king was dead, and he set up Antiochus his son to reign, whom he had brought up young, and he called his name Eupator. Now they that were in the castle had shut up the Israelites round about the holy places, and they were continually seeking their hurt, and to strengthen the Gentiles. And Judas purposed to destroy them, and he called together all the people to besiege them. And they came together and besieged them in the year 150, and they made battering slings and engines. And some of the besieged got out, and some wicked men of Israel joined themselves unto them. And they went to the king and said, How long dost thou delay to execute judgment, and to revenge our brethren? We determined to serve thy father, and to do according to his orders, and obey his edicts. And for this they of our nation are alienated from us, and have slain as many of us as they could find, and have spoiled our inheritances. Neither have they put forth their hand against us only, but also against all our borders. And behold, they have approached this day to the castle of Jerusalem to take it, and they have fortified the stronghold of Bethsura. And unless thou speedily prevent them, they will do greater things than these, and thou shalt not be able to subdue them. Now when the king heard this, he was angry, and he called together all his friends, and the captains of his army, and them that were over the horsemen. There came also to him from other realms, and from the islands of the sea, hired troops. And the number of his army was 100,000 footmen, and 20,000 horsemen, and 32 elephants trained to battle. And they went through Idumea, and approached to Bethsura, and fought many days. And they made engines, but they sallied forth and burnt them with fire, and fought manfully. And Judas departed from the castle, and removed the camp to Beth-Zacharem, over against the king's camp. And the king rose before it was light, and made his troops march on fiercely towards the way of Beth-Zacharem. And the armies made themselves ready for the battle. And they sounded the trumpets. And they showed the elephants the blood of grapes, and mulberries, to provoke them to fight. And they distributed the beasts by the legions. And there stood by every elephant 1,000 men in coats of mail, and with helmets of brass on their heads, and 500 horsemen, set in order, were chosen for every beast. These before the time, wheresoever the beast was, they were there, and whithersoever it went, they went, and they departed not from it. And upon the beast there were strong wooden towers, which covered every one of them, and engines upon them, and upon every one 32 valiant men, who fought from above, and an Indian to rule the beast. And the rest of the horsemen he placed on this side and on that side, at the 2 wings, with trumpets to stir up the army, and to hasten them forward that stood thick together in the legions thereof. Now, when the sun shone upon the shields of gold and of brass, the mountains glittered therewith, and they shone like lamps of fire. And part of the king's army was distinguished by the high mountains, and the other part by the low places, and they marched on warily and orderly. And all the inhabitants of the land were moved at the noise of their multitude, and the marching of the company, and the rattling of the armor, for the army was exceeding great and strong. And Judas and his army drew near for battle, and there fell of the king's army 600 men. And Eleazar the son of Sarah saw one of the beasts harnessed with the king's harness, and it was higher than the other beasts, and it seemed to him that the king was on it. And he exposed himself to deliver his people, and to get himself an everlasting name. And he ran up to it boldly in the midst of the legion, killing on the right hand and on the left, and they fell by him on this side and that side. And he went between the feet of the elephant, and put himself under it, and slew it. And it fell to the ground upon him, and he died there. Then they, seeing the strength of the king and the fierceness of his army, turned away from them. But the king's army went up against them to Jerusalem, and the king's army pitched their tents against Judea and Mount Sion. And he made peace with them that were in Bethsura. And they came forth out of the city, because they had no victuals, being shut up there, for it was the year of rest to the land. And the king took Bethsura, and he placed there a garrison to keep it. And he turned his army against the sanctuary for many days, and he set up there battering slings, and engines, and instruments to cast fire, and engines to cast stones and javelins, and pieces to shoot arrows and slings. And they also made engines against their engines, and they fought for many days. But there were no victuals in the city, because it was the 7th year, and such as had stayed in Judea of them that came from among the nations had eaten the residue of all that which had been stored up. And there remained in the holy places but a few, for the famine had prevailed over them, and they were dispersed every man to his own place. Now Lysias heard that Philip, whom King Antiochus while he lived had appointed to bring up his son Antiochus and to reign, was returned from Persia and Media, with the army that went with him, and that he sought to take upon him the affairs of the kingdom. Wherefore he made haste to go, and say to the king and to the captains of the army, We decay daily, and our provision of victuals is small, and the place that we lay siege to is strong, and it lieth upon us to take order for the affairs of the kingdom. Now therefore let us come to an agreement with these men, and make peace with them, and with all their nation, and let us covenant with them, that they may live according to their own laws, as before, for because of our despising their laws, they have been provoked, and have done all these things. And the proposal was acceptable in the sight of the king, and of the princes, and he sent to them to make peace. And they accepted of it. And the king and the princes swore to them, and they came out of the stronghold. Then the king entered into Mount Sion, and saw the strength of the place, and he quickly broke the oath that he had taken, and gave commandment to throw down the wall round about. And he departed in haste, and returned to Antioch, where he found Philip master of the city, and he fought against him, and took the city. End of chapter 6. Chapter 7. In the 151st year Demetrius the son of Seleucus departed from the city of Rome, and came up with few men into a city of the sea coast, and reigned there. And it came to pass, as he entered into the house of the kingdom of his fathers, that the army seized upon Antiochus and Lysias to bring them unto him. And when he knew it, he said, Let me not see their face. So the army slew them, and Demetrius sat upon the throne of his kingdom. And there came to him the wicked and ungodly men of Israel, and Alcimus was at the head of them, who desired to be made high priest. And they accused the people to the king, saying, Judas and his brethren have destroyed all thy friends, and he hath driven us out of our land. Now therefore send some men whom thou trustest, and let him go, and see all the havoc he hath made amongst us, and in the king's lands, and let him punish all his friends and their helpers. Then the king chose Maccabees, one of his friends that ruled beyond the great river in the kingdom, and was faithful to the king, and he sent him to see the havoc that Judas had made. And the wicked Alcimus he made high priest, and commanded him to take revenge upon the children of Israel. And they arose and came with a great army into the land of Judah. And they sent messengers, and spoke to Judas and his brethren with peaceable words, deceitfully. But they gave no heed to their words, for they saw that they were come with a great army. Then there assembled to Alcimus and Maccabees a company of the scribes, to require things that are just. And first the Assyrians, that were among the children of Israel, and they sought peace of them. For they said, One that is a priest of the seed of Aaron is come, he will not deceive us. And he spoke to them peaceably, and he swore to them, saying, We will do you no harm, nor your friends. And they believed him. And he took 80 of them, and slew them in one day, according to the word that is written, The flesh of thy saints, and the blood of them they have shed round about Jerusalem, and there was none to bury them. Then fear and trembling fell upon all the people, for they said, There is no truth nor justice among them, for they have broken the covenant and the oath which they made. And Maccabees removed the camp from Jerusalem, and pitched in Bethzekah, and he sent and took many of them that were fled away from him, and some of the people he killed, and threw them into a great pit. Then he committed the country to Alcimus, and left with him troops to help him. So Maccabees went away to the king. But Alcimus did what he could to maintain his chief priesthood. And they that disturbed the people resorted to him. And they got the land of Judah into their power, and did much hurt in Israel. And Judas saw all the evils that Alcimus and they that were with him did to the children of Israel, much more than the Gentiles. And he went out into all the coasts of Judea round about, and took vengeance upon the men that had revolted, and they ceased to go forth any more into the country. And Alcimus saw that Judas and they that were with him prevailed, and he knew that he could not stand against them. And he went back to the king, and accused them of many crimes. And the king sent Nicanor, one of his principal lords, who was a great enemy to Israel, and he commanded him to destroy the people. And Nicanor came to Jerusalem with a great army, and he sent to Judas and to his brethren deceitfully, with friendly words, saying, Let there be no fighting between me and you. I will come with a few men to see your faces with peace. And he came to Judas, and they saluted one another peaceably. And the enemies were prepared to take away Judas by force. And the thing was known to Judas, that he was come to him with deceit, and he was much afraid of him, and would not see his face any more. And Nicanor knew that his counsel was discovered, and he went out to fight against Judas, near Capher Salama. And there fell of Nicanor's army almost 5,000 men, and they fled into the city of David. And after this Nicanor went up into Mount Sion, and some of the priests and the people came out to salute him peaceably, and to show him the holocausts that were offered for the king. But he mocked and despised them, and abused them, and he spoke proudly, and swore in anger, saying, Unless Judas and his army be delivered into my hands, as soon as ever I return in peace, I will burn this house. And he went out in a great rage. And the priests went in and stood before the face of the altar in the temple, and weeping they said, Thou, O Lord, hast chosen this house for thy name to be called upon therein, that it might be a house of prayer and supplication for thy people. Be avenged of this man and his army, and let them fall by the sword. remember their blasphemies, and suffer them not to continue any longer. Then Nicanor went out from Jerusalem, and encamped near to Bethoron, and an army of Syria joined him. But Judas pitched in Adarsa with 3,000 men. And Judas prayed and said, O Lord, when they that were sent by King Sennacherib blasphemed thee, an angel went out and slew of them 185,000. Even so, destroy this army in our sight today, and let the rest know that he hath spoken ill against thy sanctuary, and judge thou him according to his wickedness. And the armies joined battle on the 13th day of the month, Adar. And the army of Nicanor was defeated, and he himself was first slain in the battle. And when his armies saw that Nicanor was slain, they threw away their weapons and fled. And they pursued after them 1 day's journey from Adazer, even till ye come to Gazara. And they sounded the trumpets after them with signals. And they went forth out of all the towns of Judea round about, and they pushed them with the horns, and they turned again to them, and they were all slain with the sword, and there was not left of them so much as one. And they took the spoils of them for a booty, and they cut off Nicanor's head, and his right hand, which he had proudly stretched out, and they brought it, and hung it up over against Jerusalem. And the people rejoiced exceedingly, and they spent that day with great joy. And he ordained that this day should be kept every year, being the 13th of the month of Adar. And the land of Judah was quiet for a short time. End of chapter 7. Chapter 8. Now Judas heard of the fame of the Romans, that they are powerful and strong, and willingly agree to all things that are requested of them, and that whosoever have come to them, they have made amity with them, and that they are mighty in power. And they heard of their battles, and their noble acts which they had done in Galatia, how they had conquered them, and brought them under tribute, and how great things they had done in the land of Spain, and that they had brought under their power the mines of silver and of gold that are there, and had gotten possession of all the place by their counsel and patience, and had conquered places that were very far off from them, and kings that came against them from the ends of the earth, and had overthrown them with great slaughter, and the rest pay them tribute every year. And that they had defeated in battle Philip and Perses the king of the Cetians, and the rest that had borne arms against them, and had conquered them. And how Antiochus the great king of Asia, who went to fight against them, having 120 elephants, with horsemen and chariots, and a very great army, was routed by them. And how they took him alive, and appointed to him that both he and they that should reign after him should pay a great tribute, and that he should give hostages, and that which was agreed upon. And the country of the Indians, and of the Medes, and of the Lydians, some of their best provinces, and those which they had taken from them, they gave to King Eumenes, and that they who were in Greece had a mind to go and to destroy them, and they had knowledge thereof. And they sent a general against them, and fought with them, and many of them were slain, and they carried away their wives and their children captives, and spoiled them, and took possession of their land, and threw down their walls, and brought them to be their servants unto this day. And the other kingdoms and islands that at any time had resisted them, they had destroyed and brought under their power. But with their friends and such as relied upon them, they kept amity, and had conquered kingdoms that were near, and that were far off, for all that heard their name were afraid of them. That whom they had a mind to help to a kingdom, those reigned, and whom they would, they deposed from the kingdom, and they were greatly exalted. And none of all these wore a crown, or was clothed in purple, to be magnified thereby. And that they had made themselves a senate house, and consulted daily 320 men, that sat in council always for the people, that they might do the things that were right. And that they committed their government to one man every year, to rule over all their country. And they all obey one, and there is no envy nor jealousy amongst them. So Judas chose Eupolemus, the son of John, the son of Jacob, and Jason, the son of Eleazar, and he sent them to Rome to make a league of amity and confederacy with them, and that they might take off from them the yoke of the Grecians, for they saw that they oppressed the kingdom of Israel with servitude. And they went to Rome a very long journey, and they entered into the senate house, and said, Judas Maccabeus and his brethren, and the people of the Jews, have sent us to you to make alliance and peace with you, and that we may be registered your confederates and friends. And the proposal was pleasing in their sight. And this is the copy of the writing that they wrote back again, graven in tables of brass, and sent to Jerusalem, that it might be with them there for a memorial of the peace and alliance. Good success be to the Romans, and to the people of the Jews, by sea and by land, for ever. And far be the sword and enemy from them. But if there come first any war upon the Romans, or any of their confederates in all their dominions, the nation of the Jews shall help them according as the time shall direct, with all their heart. Neither shall they give them whilst they are fighting, or furnish them with wheat, or arms, or money, or ships, as it hath seemed good to the Romans, and they shall obey their orders, without taking anything of them. In like manner also, if war shall come first upon the nation of the Jews, the Romans shall help them with all their heart, according as the time shall permit them. And there shall not be given to them that come to their aid, either wheat, or arms, or money, or ships, as it hath seemed good to the Romans, and they shall observe their orders without deceit. According to these articles did the Romans covenant with the people of the Jews. And if, after this, one party or the other shall have a mind to add to these articles, or take away anything, they may do it at their pleasure, and whatsoever they shall add or take away shall be ratified. Moreover, concerning the evils that Demetrius the king hath done against them, we have written to him, saying, Why hast thou made thy yoke heavy upon our friends and allies, the Jews? If therefore they come again to us complaining of thee, we will do them justice, and will make war against thee by sea and land. End of chapter 8. Chapter 9. In the meantime, when Demetrius heard that Nicanor and his army were fallen in battle, he sent again Bacchidus and Alcimus into Judea, and the right wing of his army with them. And they took the road that leadeth to Galgal, and they camped in Masaloth, which is in Arabella. And they made themselves masters of it, and slew many people. In the first month of the 152nd year they brought the army to Jerusalem. And they arose and went to Berea, with 20,000 men, and 2,000 horsemen. Now Judas had pitched his tents in Lasa, and 3,000 chosen men with him. And they saw the multitude of the army, that they were many, and they were seized with great fear, and many withdrew themselves out of the camp, and there remained of them no more than 800 men. And Judas saw that his army slipped away, and the battle pressed upon him, and his heart was cast down, because he had not time to gather them together, and he was discouraged. Then he said to them that remained, Let us arise, and go against our enemies, if we may be able to fight against them. But they dissuaded him, saying, We shall not be able, but let us save our lives now, and return to our brethren, and then we will fight against them, for we are but few. Then Judas said, God forbid we should do this thing, and flee away from them. But if our time be come, let us die manfully for our brethren, and let us not stain our glory. And the army removed out of the camp, and they stood over against them. And the horsemen were divided into 2 troops, and the slingers and the archers went before the army. And they that were in the front were all men of valor. And Bacchides was in the right wing, and the legion drew near on 2 sides, and they sounded the trumpets. And they also that were on Judas's side, even they also cried out, and the earth shook at the noise of the armies. And the battle was fought from morning even unto the evening. And Judas perceived that the stronger part of the army of Bacchides was on the right side, and all the stout of heart came together with him. And the right wing was discomfited by them, and he pursued them even to the Mount Azotus. And they that were in the left wing saw that the right wing was discomfited, and they followed after Judas, and them that were with him at their back. And the battle was hard fought, and there fell many wounded of the one side and of the other. And Judas was slain, and the rest fled away. And Jonathan and Simon took Judas their brother, and buried him in the sepulchre of their fathers in the city of Modin. And all the people of Israel bewailed him with great lamentation, and they mourned for him many days, and said, How is the mighty man fallen that saved the people of Israel? But the rest of the words of the wars of Judas, and of the noble acts that he did, and of his greatness, are not written, for they were very many. And it came to pass after the death of Judas, that the wicked began to put forth their heads in all the confines of Israel, and all the workers of iniquity rose up. In those days there was a very great famine, and they and all their country yielded to Maccabees. And Maccabees chose the wicked men, and made them lords of the country. And they sought out and made diligent search after the friends of Judas, and brought them to Maccabees, and he took vengeance of them, and abused them. And there was a great tribulation in Israel, such as was not since the day that there was no prophet seen in Israel. And all the friends of Judas came together, and said to Jonathan, Since thy brother Judas died there, is not a man like him to go forth against our enemies, Maccabees and them that are the enemies of our nation? Now therefore we have chosen thee this day to be our prince, and captain in his stead, to fight our battles. So Jonathan took upon him the government at that time, and rose up in the place of Judas his brother. And Maccabees had knowledge of it, and sought to kill him. And Jonathan and Simon his brother knew it, and all that were with them. And they fled into the desert of Thuqua, and they pitched by the water of the lake Asphar. And Maccabees understood it, and he came himself with all his army over the Jordan on the Sabbath day. And Jonathan sent his brother, a captain of the people, to desire the Nabutheans, his friends, that they would lend them their equipage, which was copious. And the children of Jambri came forth out of Madaba, and took John, and all that he had, and went away with them. After this it was told Jonathan and Simon his brother, that the children of Jambri made a great marriage, and were bringing the bride out of Madaba, the daughter of one of the great princes of Canaan, with great pomp. And they remembered the blood of John their brother, and they went up and hid themselves under the covert of the mountain. And they lifted up their eyes, and saw, and behold, a tumult, and great preparation. And the bridegroom came forth, and his friends, and his brethren, to meet them with timbrels, and musical instruments, and many weapons. And they rose up against them from the place where they lay in ambush, and slew them. And there fell many wounded, and the rest fled into the mountains, and they took all their spoils. And the marriage was turned into mourning, and the noise of their musical instruments into lamentation. And they took revenge for the blood of their brother, and they returned to the bank of the Jordan. And Maccabees heard it, and he came on the Sabbath day even to the bank of the Jordan with a great power. And Jonathan said to his company, Let us arise and fight against our enemies, for it is not now as yesterday, and the day before. For behold, the battle is before us, and the water of the Jordan on this side and on that side, and banks and marshes and woods, and there is no place for us to turn aside. Now therefore cry ye to heaven, that ye may be delivered from the hand of your enemies. And they joined battle. And Jonathan stretched forth his hand to strike Maccabees, but he turned away from him backwards. And Jonathan and they that were with him leapt into the Jordan, and swam over the Jordan to them. And there fell of Maccabees' side that day 1,000 men, and they returned to Jerusalem. And they built strong cities in Judea, the fortress that was in Jericho, and in Amos, and in Bethoron, and in Bethel, and Thamnata, and Farah, and Thopo, with high walls and gates and bars. And he placed garrisons in them, that they might wage war against Israel. And he fortified the city of Bethsura, and Gazara, and the castle, and set garrisons in them, and provisions of victuals. And he took the sons of the chief men of the country for hostages, and put them in the castle in Jerusalem in custody. Now in the year 153, the 2nd month, Alchemus commanded the walls of the inner court of the sanctuary to be thrown down, and the works of the prophets to be destroyed. And he began to destroy. At that time Alchemus was struck, and his works were hindered, and his mouth was stopped, and he was taken with a palsy, so that he could no more speak a word, nor give order concerning his house. And Alchemus died at that time in great torment. And Bacchides saw that Alcimus was dead, and he returned to the king, and the land was quiet for 2 years. And all the wicked held a council, saying, Behold, Jonathan, and they that are with him, dwell at ease and without fear. Now therefore let us bring Bacchides hither, and he shall take them all in one night. So they went and gave him counsel. And he arose to come with a great army, and he sent secretly letters to his adherents that were in Judea, to seize upon Jonathan, and them that were with him. But they could not, for their design was known to them. And he apprehended of the men of the country, that were the principal authors of the mischief, 50 men, and he slew them. And Jonathan and Simon and they that were with him retired into Bethbessen, which is in the desert. And he repaired the breaches thereof, and they fortified it. And when Bacchides knew it, he gathered together all his multitude, and sent word to them that were of Judea. And he came and camped above Bethbessen, and fought against it many days, and made engines. But Jonathan left his brother Simon in the city, and went forth into the country, and came with a number of men, and struck Odoris and his brethren, and the children of Phaseron in their tents, and he began to slay and to increase in forces. But Simon and they that were with him sallied out of the city, and burnt the engines. And they fought against Bacchides, and he was discomfited by them. And they afflicted him exceedingly for his counsel, and his enterprise was in vain. And he was angry with the wicked men that had given him counsel to come into their country. And he slew many of them, and he purposed to return with the rest into their country. And Jonathan had knowledge of it, and he sent ambassadors to him, to make peace with him, and to restore to him the prisoners. And he accepted it willingly, and did according to his words, and swore that he would do him no harm all the days of his life. And he restored to him the prisoners which he before had taken out of the land of Judah. And he returned, and went away into his own country, and he came no more into their borders. So the sword ceased from Israel, and Jonathan dwelt in Maccabees. And Jonathan began there to judge the people, and he destroyed the wicked out of Israel. End of chapter 9. Chapter 10. Now, in the 160th year, Alexander, the son of Antiochus, surnamed the Illustrious, came up and took Ptolemais, and they received him, and he reigned there. And King Demetrius heard of it, and gathered together an exceeding great army, and went forth against him to fight. And Demetrius sent a letter to Jonathan, with peaceable words, to magnify him. For he said, Let us first make a peace with him, before he make one with Alexander against us. For he will remember all the evils that we have done against him, and against his brother, and against his nation. And he gave him authority to gather together an army, and to make arms, and that he should be his confederate. And the hostages that were in the castle he commanded to be delivered to him. And Jonathan came to Jerusalem, and read the letters in the hearing of all the people, and of them that were in the castle. And they were struck with great fear, because they heard that the king had given him authority to gather together an army. And the hostages were delivered to Jonathan, and he restored them to their parents. And Jonathan dwelt in Jerusalem, and began to build, and to repair the city. And he ordered workmen to build the walls and Mount Sion round about, with square stones for fortification. And so they did. Then the strangers that were in the strongholds which Bacchides had built fled away, and every man left his place and departed into his own country. Only in Bethsura there remained some of them that had forsaken the law and the commandments of God, for this was a place of refuge for them. And King Alexander heard of the promises that Demetrius had made Jonathan, and they told him of the battles, and the worthy acts that he and his brethren had done, and the labors that they had endured. And he said, Shall we find such another man? Now therefore we will make him our friend and our confederate. So he wrote a letter, and sent it to him according to these words, saying, King Alexander, to his brother Jonathan, greetings. We have heard of thee, that thou art a man of great power, and fit to be our friend. Now therefore we make thee this day high priest of thy nation, and that thou be called the king's friend. And he sent him a purple robe and a crown of gold. And that thou be of one mind with us in our affairs, and keep friendship with us. Then Jonathan put on the holy vestment in the 7th month, in the year 160, at the feast day of the tabernacles, and he gathered together an army, and made a great number of arms. And Demetrius heard these words, and was exceeding sorry, and said, What is this that we have done, that Alexander hath prevented us to gain the friendship of the Jews to strengthen himself? I also will write to them words of request, and offer dignities and gifts, that they may be with me to aid me. And he wrote to them in these words, King Demetrius to the nation of the Jews, greeting. Whereas you have kept covenant with us, and have continued in our friendship, and have not joined with our enemies, we have heard of it, and are glad. Wherefore now continue still to keep fidelity towards us, and we will reward you with good things, for what you have done in our behalf. And we will remit to you many charges, and will give you gifts. And now I free you and all the Jews from tributes, and I release you from the customs of salt, and remit the crowns, and the thirds of the seed, and the half of the fruit of trees, which is my share. I leave to you from this day forward, so that it shall not be taken of the land of Judah, and of the 3 cities that are added thereto, out of Samaria and Galilee, from this day forth, and for ever. And let Jerusalem be holy and free, with the borders thereof, and let the tenths and tributes be for itself. I yield up also the power of the castle that is in Jerusalem, and I give it to the high priest, to place therein such men as he shall choose, to keep it. And every soul of the Jews that hath been carried captive from the land of Judah, and all my kingdom, I set at liberty, freely, that all be discharged from tributes, even of their cattle. And I will that all the feasts, and the Sabbaths, and the new moons, and the days appointed, and 3 days before the solemn day, and 3 days after the solemn day, be all days of immunity and freedom for all the Jews that are in my kingdom. And no man shall have power to do anything against them, or to molest any of them in any cause. And let there be enrolled in the king's army to the number of 30,000 of the Jews, and allowance shall be made them, as is due to all the king's forces, and certain of them shall be appointed to be in the fortresses of the great king. And some of them shall be set over the affairs of the kingdom, that are of trust, and let the governors be taken from among themselves, and let them walk in their own laws, as the king hath commanded in the land of Judah. And the 3 cities that are added to Judea, out of the country of Samaria, let them be accounted with Judea, that they may be under one, and obey no other authority but that of the high priest. Ptolemais and the confines thereof I give as a free gift to the holy places that are in Jerusalem, for the necessary charges of the holy things. And I give every year 15,000 sickles of silver out of the king's accounts of what belongs to me. And all that is above, which they that were over the affairs the years before had not paid, from this time they shall give it to the works of the house. Moreover, the 5,000 sickles of silver, which they received from the account of the holy places, every year shall also belong to the priests that execute the ministry. And whosoever shall flee into the temple that is in Jerusalem, and in all the borders thereof, being indebted to the king for any matter, let them be set at liberty, and all that they have in my kingdom, let them have it free. For the building also, or repairing the works of the holy places, the charges shall be given out of the king's revenues. For the building also of the walls of Jerusalem, and the fortifying thereof round about, the charges shall be given out of the king's account, as also for the building of the walls in Judea. Now, when Jonathan and the people heard these words, they gave no credit to them, nor received them, because they remembered the great evil that he had done in Israel, for he had afflicted them exceedingly. And their inclinations were towards Alexander, because he had been the chief promoter of peace in their regard, and him they always helped. And King Alexander gathered together a great army, and moved his camp near to Demetrius. And the 2 kings joined battle, and the army of Demetrius fled away, and Alexander pursued after him, and pressed them close. And the battle was hard fought, till the sun went down, and Demetrius was slain that day. And Alexander sent ambassadors to Ptolemy, king of Egypt, with words to this effect, saying, Forasmuch as I am returned into my kingdom, and am set in the throne of my ancestors, and have gotten the dominion, and have overthrown Demetrius, and possessed our country, and have joined battle with him, and both he and his army have been destroyed by us, and we are placed in the throne of his kingdom. Now therefore let us make friendship one with another, and give me now thy daughter to wife, and I will be thy son-in-law, and I will give both thee and her gifts worthy of thee. And King Ptolemy answered, saying, Happy is the day wherein thou didst return to the land of thy fathers, and sattest in the throne of their kingdom. And now I will do to thee as thou hast written. But meet me at Ptolemais, that we may see one another, and I may give her to thee as thou hast said. So Ptolemy went out of Egypt with Cleopatra his daughter, and he came to Ptolemais in the 162nd year. And King Alexander met him, and he gave him his daughter Cleopatra, and he celebrated her marriage at Ptolemais with great glory, after the manner of kings. And King Alexander wrote to Jonathan that he should come and meet him. And he went honorably to Ptolemais, and he met there the two kings, and he gave them much silver and gold and presents, and he found favor in their sight. And some pestilent men of Israel, men of a wicked life, assembled themselves against him to accuse him, and the king gave no heed to them. And he commanded that Jonathan's garments should be taken off, and that he should be clothed with purple, and they did so. And the king made him sit by himself. And he said to his princes, Go out with him into the midst of the city, and make proclamation, that no man complain against him of any matter, and that no man trouble him for any manner of cause. So when his accusers saw his glory proclaimed, and him clothed with purple, they all fled away. And the king magnified him, and enrolled him amongst his chief friends, and made him governor, and partaker of his dominion. And Jonathan returned into Jerusalem with peace and joy. In the year 165, Demetrius, the son of Demetrius, came from Crete into the land of his fathers. And King Alexander heard of it, and was much troubled, and returned to Antioch. And King Demetrius made Apollonius his general, who was governor of Celesyria, and he gathered together a great army, and came to Jamnia, and he sent to Jonathan the high priest, saying, Thou alone standest against us, and I am laughed at and reproached, because thou showest thy power against us in the mountains. Now, therefore, if thou trustest in thy forces, come down to us into the plain, and there let us try one another, for with me is the strength of war. Ask and learn who I am, and the rest that help me, who also say that your foot cannot stand before our face. For thy fathers have twice been put to flight in their own land. And now how wilt thou be able to abide the horsemen, and so great an army in the plain, where there is no stone, nor rock, nor place to flee to? Now, when Jonathan heard the words of Apollonius, he was moved in his mind, and he chose 10,000 men, and went out of Jerusalem, and Simon his brother met him to help him. And they pitched their tents near Joppe, but they shut him out of the city, because a garrison of Apollonius was in Joppe, and he laid siege to it. And they that were in the city, being affrighted, opened the gates to him. So Jonathan took Joppe. And Apollonius heard of it, and he took 3,000 horsemen, and a great army, and he went to Azotus, as one that was making a journey. And immediately he went forth into the plain, because he had a great number of horsemen, and he trusted in them. And Jonathan followed after him to Azotus, and they joined battle. And Apollonius left privately in the camp 1,000 horsemen behind them. And Jonathan knew that there was an ambush behind him, and they surrounded his army, and cast darts at the people from morning till evening. But the people stood still as Jonathan had commanded them, and so their horses were fatigued. Then Simon drew forth his army, and attacked a legion, for the horsemen were wearied, and they were discomfited by him, and fled. And they that were scattered about the plain fled into Azotus, and went into Beth-dagon, their idol's temple, there to save themselves. But Jonathan set fire to Azotus, and the cities that were round about it, and took the spoils of them, and the temple of Dagon, and all them that were fled into it, he burnt with fire. So they that were slain by the sword with them that were burnt were almost 8,000 men. And Jonathan removed his army from thence, and camped against Askelon. And they went out of the city to meet him with great honor. And Jonathan returned into Jerusalem with his people, having many spoils. And it came to pass, when Alexander the king heard these words, that he honored Jonathan yet more. And he sent him a buckle of gold, as the custom is, to be given to such as are of the royal blood. And he gave him Acheron, and all the borders thereof, in possession. End of chapter 10.